Hi, I'm James Barr, and tonight we're going to be reading a few excerpts from Patrick Henry's speech before the Virginia House of Representatives, in which he was trying to convince the Virginia House of Representatives to arm their militia. The militia is not quite an army, but more than the police. It's a group of citizens who get together and think of them as the early version of the National Guard. But when we read through it, I want to think out loud about some of the things that I'm thinking while I read it, because the challenge for a lot of students in a text like this, the challenge for a lot of students in a text like this is the wording and the phrase usage and their use of the language. So we're going to tackle that out loud as I read through this, and hopefully as I do this, you'll be able to better understand some of the things that were written by our founding fathers when you do your own research from this time period, being the late 1700s, early 1800s. All right? So let's listen in, and Patrick Henry begins his speech March 23rd, 1775. Also, this is the famous speech that had "Give me liberty or give me death." All right? No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. Let's pause there. Okay, that sounds an awful lot like a lot of flattery. Listen to him how he says, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. I'm thinking, when someone comes, especially in a political arena, and says something like that, that's almost the same way as when someone says, with all due respect, right before they say something disrespectful. I believe he's getting ready to say that he's about to say some things that might offend them. Let's find out. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. Okay, let's pause there. Wow. So not only, wait a second, so it sounds like, I'm thinking Patrick Henry not only decided he was going to go against them, but he thought about how they would feel about him saying these things beforehand, and so he's trying to already apologize. He's basically saying, now what I'm going to say may offend you, but hear me out. Different people see things different ways. When he says, I hope it will not be thought disrespectful, and he also preceded that with, but different men often see the same subject in different lights. How true is that? When you see a story, or when something happens, like a car crash at an intersection, and you ask everybody what happens, you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different stories. So, let's pick up where he left off. This is no time for ceremony. Ceremony. What do we think of when we have a ceremony? I think of things that have a script to them. You know, like a wedding has a definite order. The priest or the preacher comes in and calls both the bride and up there, and then so on and so forth, and it ends with, I do, right? Or a retirement ceremony, or things that have a script, and they take a while generally. What I think what Patrick Henry's trying to say is we don't have time for nice games or a long drawn-out story. Let's see. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. That's a powerful phrase. The question before this House is one of awful moment. What do we think of when we think of awful? I think of things that are bad, things that are terrible, things that inspire awe. Awe, basically, if you were to put it into a facial expression, I think awe would look like this. Okay? So, now we have Patrick Henry telling them that the country is at a moment of decision. For my part, I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of debate. So basically what he's saying is, as important as this decision is, whether we remain free or whether we resign ourselves to be slaves, as important as that is, we ought to be open about our debate. So basically, he's using a lot of nice flowery words to say we need to cut the nice BS and cut straight to the chase and get to the heart of the facts. All right? For my own part, I consider it nothing less than a freedom. It is the only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Whoa. Okay, let's stop there. When he says, that's the only way, freedom of debate is the only way we're going to come at the truth. And if we don't do that, then we are not living up to our responsibilities. First, he calls out God, right? And our country. So he's like, if we don't do this openly and debate this right, then we're betraying not only our country, but God. And so you got to understand, everyone was very religious back then. Saying somebody wasn't religious was, it was the political equivalent of calling someone a racist today. It was the ultimate trump card, no pun intended. Anyway, he's calling out and drawing his authority from God, all right? So, should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? In other words, if I should not say my mind for fear of upsetting someone, then I should consider myself as guilty of treason toward my country and an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly things. In other words, he's saying if he doesn't speak his mind, he's not only betraying his country, he's betraying God. Okay, so he's putting him behind him. That's what I think whenever I think of that. All right. Now, we skip over to where he is trying to argue his point, and he's trying to make sure that he gets all of his points in. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided. All right, that people didn't have flashlights. If they rode at night or went walking at night, they had to carry a lamp with them. All right, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. So he's saying, basically, I think, whenever I read that, I think he's saying the only way we can tell what someone's going to do is by what they've done in the past. Right? So let's keep going. And judging by the past, I wish to know, in other words, he's saying, tell me what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify. What do we do when we justify something? We prove it. Yeah. We prove it. So, to prove those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves. What is solace? Even if we don't know what solace is, we can look at context clues in the front. The hopes which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves in the house. It sounds like he's saying satisfy. So solace could be satisfaction. In other words, people being content in the hope that the British are going to change their ways. He then goes on to pose the question, are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? In other words, Why, if the British love us and are willing to talk with us, why are they amassing a fleet in Boston Harbor and amassing armies on our own shores? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments by which kings resort. In other words, he's saying there's no other decision. That king has already made up his mind. He's either going to subjugate us, enslave us, or he is going to or we're going to beat him back and beat them off of our shores through force. All right? And it ends with the line, what is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet as to be purchased, bought, at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it. In other words, don't let it happen, God. So he at this last bit, he starts saying, he's basically uttering a prayer, it looks like. Almighty God, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. When I hear him say that, it gives me goosebumps. It makes me think, here's a guy who wants to be free or dead. Anyway, I hope that this has helped you with deciphering some of these texts from this period. Thank you, and have a great evening.